So, first things first, new session. I've got all my templates saved in Pro Tools as well as the desktop. Every single night, the computer backs up to my cloud. The cloud will take the session folders, the Pro Tools preference folders, and all of my template folders, and it updates that every single night just in case I make a change. All of my templates are there. Highly recommend doing that, especially if you have a lot of the delete preferences that happens with Pro Tools and you have to go back and set stuff up. If you have them in the cloud, you just copy back down, everything's good to go, you're back in business, you don't have to work on setting up all your little shortcuts. So right now I have a couple different session templates that I've used, but the main one I'm using is mono mixing. I'll explain that in a second, why it's mono versus stereo. I do have a couple different ones, but we're going to create this one. We're going to call it mono mixing is fine, and we're going to open this guy up. You can see I've already created one, so we'll just overwrite that one. And yep, there we go. And so what it's going to do is every single time I start a session, the first thing I do is I bring all of the audio tracks that are sent to me and I take them into Soundizer Stereo Monoizer. Inside Stereo Monoizer, I get everything set to a -10 peak, which then gets everything kind of in check for the way my gear is set up and calibrated. It just gets me mixing quicker. It also takes files that are stereo that should be mono. Usually people from Logic, if they send stuff out when they're using Logic, it will export as stereo. It's just how it works. And it's just time consuming if you have 80 tracks and they're all stereo and you need to go mono, 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 mono. So you bring it into Soundizer Stereo Monoizer and load it up here, drop the files in, hit analyze, and it will take it and basically I set mine to -10, and then I basically pick the folder where it goes. You'd analyze the files, it goes down through it, and then you process, and it actually takes everything and goes, nope, you're stereo, you should be mono. It makes it a mono file and puts it into the folder, and away you go, you're mixing. Import that stuff in, it's perfect. But right now, this is my template. This is the main one that I'm using, and I call it mono because in the Sigma, the SSL Sigma, it is a 32-channel summing mixer, but it is 16 stereo pairs. And so if you're using a mono channel on a kick drum, say, and you select mono within the Sigma, you lose a output side. It's just how it's set up. So it's the left side always, which then obviously is center, but it just uses 1 versus 2 mono tracks. So I have it to where I have a kick, a snare, toms, you know, typical stuff, but kick, snare, bass, lead vocal, parallel vocal are all of my mono channels, and we're going to talk about that here. So the first track is my SSL Sigma channel is what I call it, and it has a plugin, the Delta plugin, which is a 16-channel mixer, which this controls the Sigma. It's very fluid. I can literally come into the session on my channel here and basically hit the button, hit flip, and now I have control of the SSL Sigma in the box. I can sit here, not in the box, but the hardware itself, and this would represent the channels that I'm sending to the SSL from Pro Tools. So it's that whole idea of Pro Tools as a tape machine again, and this is the mixer. And you can see I've got it kind of stemmed out where it's kick, snare, toms, drums, parallel drums, all synthy type stuff, keyboards, pianos type stuff, bass, lead vocal, and then parallel vocals, background vocals, acoustic guitars, electric guitars, all solo instruments, a rear bus, which we'll talk about later, and then all of my effects channels. Like I was talking about in my prior video, I have an A and a B bus within the Sigma, and I run all of my music on the A bus, and then all of my lead vocals and vocals on the B bus. And reason why that happens is this plugin here is the Mix A and Mix B bus. There is another plugin that lets you actually control the gain and volume of the Sigma. I have it set. I don't really touch it much. It's just how everything's calibrated. But basically the A bus, again, is all music. So I start that at -10, and I insert gear. So my A bus is my TK audio in mid side, which allows me to filter out all the mud from the sides, and then I can really dial in the center. And then I have a 5.1 SSL Bus Compressor that runs in 2 stereo modes. So I run it in dual stereo, so I have a top and a bottom stereo compressor. So the top channel is all the music, and then from there it goes to the pair of warm audio Pultecs as just a final sheen coming out before it goes to the next phase. The vocals are on B, and B will go into the hammer EQ, which gives it a really nice top end, super clean tube sound, and then it goes into the other two channels of the SSL. And again, these are just barely hitting the SSL. I mean, it's like 2 dB max of compression. And what's cool about the vocal is when you insert it and you hit this little button here, it goes on top of A. So A will be compressed and doing all of its magic, and then the vocals just sit on top, and it just kind of has this thing where the vocals are right up front where you want them, and the music is just kind of all over the place. And I've been working that way for a couple years now. It works and sounds great. Once that's done, it all comes out of the SSL SIGMA into the Fusion, which the Fusion allows you to have a little bit more flavor at the end, if you will. It has some great features, and then it has a final compressor that lately I've been running my API 2500 into. I need to send it out because it's got some push-pull going on the left side, and I got to figure out what's going on with that. But I'll use that coming into the Fusion, and then the Fusion basically gives it that extra fun, that extra glue for the final digital to go back digital. So when it goes back out digital, it comes into this input channel on Pro Tools, which allows me to have the Vertigo from Plugin Alliance. This thing is amazing on a mix. It pretty much lives on every mix. Very subtle. You can really kill it quick, so you have to watch it and make sure you really use your ears on this one. And then I run it into the Phoenix 2 tape emulation, and then from there I have a limiter. The limiter is on just to catch things, but I'm using it really when I print a louder mix. I'll just crank it up to get the mix to where I need for competition wise to send out a loud mix to people to like. And then it prints into the song track, which right now this has a audio movers, so I can stream this out to customers if I need to. And then here is our SonarWorks plugin, which I figured out a way to keep this on all the time and not actually have to disable it when you're printing. So I run it on a master fader. Since I'm running in and printing, I run it on a master fader in Pro Tools all the time, and you don't have to turn it off. It doesn't affect the mix, so it actually works really great. SonarWorks, highly recommend it if you're especially in a home studio like mine. It really helps dial in things. I've done a lot of treatment in here. I've done a lot of work in here, but you can always make things better. I highly recommend using it and trying it out. So then the green channels, onto the green channels. These guys are all my VCAs. Primarily use these just for the Pro Tools Control app on my tablet here. What's great about it is when I import the tracks in, which I'll show you after this video, you basically hit drums and it spills all the drums to my faders. So I can pull everything down in the mix when I start and then hit drums, and it's all the way, just the drum tracks, and hopefully it's 16, less than 16 because they're all in front of me, otherwise you bank. But you basically just get your drums dialed in real quick, you have your bass assigned, you hit bass, it spills the bass. It goes all the way across all the mix. Very fast, very, very efficient way to get your tracks up to a level that you need quickly, balance-wise. The blue tracks are all of my aux tracks that emulate the Sigma. And the reason why I do this is just one, ease for me to remember where things are, but it's just organization for the session, honestly. The good thing about this is if I'm mixing in the box, I can come in here and I can set all the outputs to main, and we're in the box. But if I'm mixing through the Sigma and just gear, how it's set up, I'll start sending pieces to it, and away it goes. It's very fluid, because the other great thing is if I hit buses, all of my faders switch to that specific S-kick through SFX tracks. And now in my fader pack, I have just the 16 channels that I need for mixing, and then I go back and touch it, and it spills it back out, and all the tracks are there. And so I can quickly go back and forth. I wish the Sigma, or I wish SSL would have a feature to where I could hit one button on this app and it would go and spill it, instead of going into here, hitting, you know, the track, hitting the SSL, you know, plugin, hitting flip, and then having it in there. I wish they'd have it to where I can macro it and hit one button, but I haven't figured it out yet. It's not a big deal. But the great thing is if I'm mixing in the box, I hit buses and all my buses spill out, and I know that number 9 is my lead vocal and number 8 is my bass, and then the first 5 tracks are all my drums and all my guitars are over here, and it's a very fluid, fast setup. Let's go through the plugins real quick here. So trim plugin by, well, it says trim on here, it looks like trim, it's actually True Iron. Casbox True Iron is a transformer based plugin. Highly recommend demoing this thing. Hard to describe what it does. It just kind of makes things sound better, warmer in a digital world. It's kind of like my initial prep of the tracks before they go out to the Sigma, because once they're out into the Sigma, they're out of digital, they're in analog world, and we're in 100% analog when we come out. So the Sigma acts like a console coming in. It's pre-fader, so I have things calibrated. I'm getting all the goodness that you can with gear in that world. But I don't use it all the time. It really depends on what's happening in the mix. If the song needs something, then yeah, I'll go patch it in. But usually I can mix in the box, or I can mix with just the Sigma as in the center section as the mixer with no hardware, which makes it, or no outside hardware minus the center section, which makes it really kind of fun, easy to recall. You just use session recall and put your stuff into it, and you just have a bucket for your center section and name the session, you're good. But anyways, so I start with that, and then coming down, recently I've been really using the SSL Native plugins quite a bit. These things are fantastic. The algorithms are spot on with what's on the AWS and the duality stuff. Mainly the duality is what I understand. But I'm fortunate enough to be using these, and the drum strip is amazing. You need to watch the gate. The gate will suck the life out of the drums real quick if you're not careful. So definitely start playing around and tweaking with those. But I come across here, I've got some of their saturation plugin, which this thing is amazing. You can really destroy stuff, but it's in a really smooth way. And it just has a little bit of a grit underneath that's not so distortion. It just has a nice saturation going on. So I recommend testing that out if you can. The vocalist channel is another good one. You can really tweak your EQs and find some good spots there. You know, all this stuff is really, really kind of nice to play with. Turn the equalizer on and off. You can bump some stuff. Some nice little bell curves there. So you can find some freaks that are ripping your ears off and get rid of them. So great set of plugins here. If we need some more air, we go and we add the Mog EQ, which you just basically do this and go, okay, I need some air. There it is. So it works really well. I forgot to add it back in, but I'm going to do it right now. This plugin is like magic. The Billy Decker mixes some amazing records out there in Nashville, and he's got this little bundle that he put on for sale, I think a year or so ago. And this electric guitar, a friend of mine turned me on to this thing. I don't know what it does. It decorates things, as he calls it. But man, you put this thing on and you just turn this thing just a little bit, and it's like the guitars just go whoop and come up into your face, and then you can just kind of push and pull and mix it, and it's an amazing plug-in. I always forget to add it back, but there it is. And they've got some other ones too, but I haven't gotten quite into those as much yet. And then I do the L1 trick on all the tracks, and this fluctuates. This is not something that I stress, like you got to have this because it's going to help your mixes. To me, it's a safety net. I mix at K20, so I have a lot of headroom anyways. I have 20 dB of headroom if I do things right. And I'm gain staging my tracks down 10 dB for peaks, which could be, and it's a perfect, for me, it's a perfect setup to where things need to go for mixing. So I set this here just to get volume and to make sure that if I'm hitting it too hard, I can see it in the fader, one, and I'll know because I'll start hearing it. And it's just something I saw Chris Lord-Alge do on his mixes, and I just started doing it, I don't know, 2 years ago, and I like it. If I need to tweak it, I can tweak the levels up and down to get where I need to go for threshold-wise if it starts moving. Generally, it doesn't move. Again, it's just for sound, and it's just for a safety net. And that's pretty much my template each time. If I'm running stereo kick drum and snare drum items, then I will make a new template that is called stereo, which I have, but it will be a kick and everything will be stereo basically. It'll be 32 channels of the Sigma and full use. But right now I'm technically using every stem, but I'm using about, I think, 27 stems total when I mix and how I set things up. So the next video, we're going to talk about importing in the audio, getting it prepped, figuring out getting the routing and how I do things. And I've got a new setup where I'm not using sends anymore to these buses. I'm actually multi-outputting it in Pro Tools, which to my ear, in this using the Sigma, it sounds like the phase stays in better phase coherence. So we're going to do that next. Thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe and be safe. We'll talk to you guys later.